So this is the last meeting, the last recordings of the class. So we're almost to the finish. So what we're going to do is now switch over to human behavior. We've mentioned it a few times throughout the semester, but not a lot. We talked about sociality last week. And so what we want to do is look at sociobiology this week and look at humans and how we react to each other. So what makes us human? And that's a huge philosophical question. I'm not sure I can answer in a small 10-minute recording, and I'm not. But there are some things that make us different. Over the years, we thought we were unique with the ability to make tools, and we found out that's not true. And even communication is not obviously limited to us. We talked about communication before, but we are the only ones that speak, that have a language that is as complex as ours. So we want to take a look at that. Dr. Philip Lieberman of Brown University explains that it really has to do with kind of the evolution of our throat and mouth, larynx, very similar to chimps, although because of some changes, basically a longer neck, larger larynx, it allows for us to change pitch and be a lot more pronounced with our speech. So it gives us an enormous advantage. So what I want you to do is I've got an NPR recording. It's just audio, very short, and listen to an interview on NPR with Philip Lieberman and actually a couple other people. So that's one thing. The history of human speech, they've done studies on a gene. It's the FOXP2 gene. I want you to know that. Linked to language ability. I also want to make sure you understand that this does not make us human by any means. There's been some studies saying that maybe this gene is not as necessary as it was once thought, but I do want you to be aware of it. So this gene makes transcription factors, and without a bio background, that doesn't really matter. It just means that your genetics are read and proteins are made. And then these proteins go out and turn on or turn off additional genes in your body. And what that is really actually doing is allowing you to make this neural circuitry in the brain that allows you to speak. And and so when you're learning language, which we're going to talk about in a minute, these connections in the brain are extremely important. How important are they is up for debate. So we want to look at to see the genetics and how important they are. So one of the easier ways to do it in people is adoption studies. And obviously you don't set this up, but you can look at it once it's been set up. And what they found out is they studied this looking at parents and offspring, whether they were in a house together, the offspring were raised with their own parents or adopted parents. And the idea is to look at kind of who do they resemble, either their parent or the adopted parent. And it turns out if you look at the relationships in the picture on the right, what you're really looking at is the first graph is verbal ability, and that is really highly correlated to genetics. So even when they are raised apart, their verbal ability really kind of matches or is more closely related, or correlated is the key word there, to their genetic parents, not the adopted parents. And you can also see spatial ability, the ability to kind of map things out where things are, also, but not maybe quite as high or as the verbal ability. So what we do know is genetics plays a huge factor in setting up these intelligences, and environment has a lot lower factor. Okay, so let's look at the region of the brain if we're going to talk about speech. We talked about Broca's areas before, where Paul Broca actually looked at people with brain damage and then their language ability. And there is a couple of areas we want to talk about. One is the Broca's area, and again, that if you damage that area, speech is highly inhibited. We also have the Wernicke's area is often said to be responsible for the production and comprehension of speech. So these two obviously work together. And what they found in infants, exposure to speech during social interactions with adults shape the brain. So what you really want to do, you want to talk to your kids, and that's why reading to your kids and talking to your kids, all those things are extremely important to help with the ability of speech. And what we actually find is the way the brain is set up and the networks are being set up, maybe by the gene we talked about before, building those neural nets, it's definitely easier to learn languages and music and things like that at an early age. And we find in teenagers, the second language drops off pretty quickly. And of course, we teach second language in high school. So yeah, we're idiots. But yeah, so for those of you that are bilingual or trilingual or even more, props to you. I barely speak English and I don't even do that well. So would have loved to have, and I've taken a couple of different languages in high school and college, and never got real good at it, and then never used it, so kind of lost it. But that's unfortunate. I think that's a great skill to have and hold on to. And then the last one here is the function of the superior temporal sulcus of the brain. And so you can see there's kind of dots on the side talking about body movement, mouth movement, eye gaze, hand movement, all kind of associated there in that little fold. Babies, when a baby's born, their eyes don't focus. It's they're looking at me. They're not looking at crap. Everything's kind of a blur. But then things start to focus in. They get better at finding things and seeing things. And what they have found in babies is the attention really is kind of at the eyes, and our eyes are very expressive, and so they're learning. But then right about 6 months, they've noticed the eye focus changes to the mouth. It's like they're lip reading, and they're trying to figure out what is this sound, and what does that mean. At 1 year, then the baby begins to speak their first words. They switch back to looking at the eyes. And that lip reading has been traced to this one part. So they think that's an important part of the development of babies in language is working on that lip reading part. I do know that, I don't know about you, but lip reading is something, if you have trouble hearing somebody, often you will look at their lips trying to make sense of what they do. I know lip reading is done by people who are deaf. And I know that I've had deaf students in my class where I'm rough, and I'm rough because the beard makes it hard to see the lips, and I've been told that makes it a little bit harder for people to read lips. So yeah, we'll stop the share, and then we'll stop the recording.